Well, he may not have conquered Eternia, but his plans are now set for Primus. Here's a look at the Mattel Master Universe Masterverse, the new adventures of He-Man, Skeletor. Skeletor was alerted to the arrival of the Galactic Guardians Captain Hydron and Lieutenant Flipshot in the past via his henchman Andros, who captured and brought them to Snake Mountain. Learning of the plight of Primus, Skeletor immediately schemed to take advantage of their peaceful nature and advanced technology, and tricked Hydron and Flipshot in believing he was force for good they had traveled back to the past to find. While Skeletor is traveling to the planet of Primus, this guy unfortunately had to travel to the planet of eBay in order to get this guy for myself. Had hoped, good case scenario, would have been able to find this guy in retail. Worst case scenario was unfortunately I had to go to eBay because there was no other online site that seemed to sell him. And I paid a little bit more for him. We'll talk more about that in a moment. First though, Skeletor actually already has his helmet on. It is something technically you could remove for the figure, but I always like to keep it on the figure because I just think it looks that much cooler. With that in mind, the figure is actually about 7¼ inches in height, where New Adventures Skeletor is 18 centimeters tall. We don't really have much in the way of New Adventures He-Man figures. The only one other than He-Man, which I haven't yet picked up, is the New Adventures Slushhead, which of course will go nicely with Skeletor. His only minion he's actually gotten in the toy line so far. I'm holding out hope for an Optic. Let's bring in a couple of other Skeletor figures for comparisons. Here's what he looks like with the Skeletech from Master Universe Revolution. And here's also what the figure looks like with the new Eternia Skeletor, the Barbarian Skeletor. I just reverted him back more so to his classic look. And because, again, I don't have a New Adventures of He-Man just yet, that's going to be changing hopefully soon, I'm going to bring in the new Eternia Battle Armor He-Man, which actually in his review, I did say he was the same mold that they actually used for the Revelation He-Man. That's not really the case. They actually have given him a brand new buck, something that's also going to come included with the new released Thunder Punch He-Man as well. Sharing a quick story about being a Canadian collector and trying to track down Motu figures. I already mentioned I did buy this guy over on eBay, but I didn't tell you the price that I paid for him. He was listed, at least in the auction, as $27 US, which you're probably thinking to yourself, $27, that's not bad at all for a figure. Once it's converted to Canadian, and then of course you add the fun shipping charges and all the brokerage fees that goes along with it. Anybody want to take a guess as to how much I paid for New Adventures Skeletor? Anybody? Somebody has already said $60. No. Afraid not. It was a little bit more than 60. When it was all said and done, when I was all finally into picking up Skeletor, I had already acquired the figure for $91. That's again, once the conversion is in place and all the fun stuff got tacked on top of it. Yeah, getting this guy was a little bit more expensive. But I will say though, even though he is an older figure, and I'm sure there's been tons of reviews already online for Skeletor, I'm glad to finally say I have him in my collection. There's something about New Adventures Skeletor, even just New Adventures He-Man, the series. It's a really off-putting, I mean, especially if you're a big fan of the original Motu series by Filmation, to then watch the New Adventures of He-Man. It's almost like trying to eat a bitter lemon. It's nothing like the original series. And yet there's a charm to it, especially with Skeletor. This Skeletor was also released in the original, obviously, New Adventures of He-Man toy line. And he also bears somewhat of a slight resemblance to Laser Light Skeletor, part of the original classic line. The figure for accessories, other than the helmet that I'm going to be removing shortly, does come included with a pair of closed fists. The fists aren't going to serve much at all purpose for me. Likely I'm just going to be having the figure displayed with his gripping hands that he already has on the ends of his forearms anyways, just because it's a lot easier for him to hold the staff. Not only just the one hand, but also you can have him wielding it in both hands. Speaking of the staff is very much similar to the one we got from the original Master Universe, or the original New Adventures of He-Man Skeletor. Obviously it's just a little bit bigger here. It's molded really nicely here in a dark gray plastic. You can see the way they've done the skull motif here. A skull and crossbones, which sort of has almost on the end of it like a cattle prod or a shocking prod on the end of it. Really neat looking staff. It's quite long too. I mean, if you look at it next to Skeletor's body, it goes right past the point. It's a little bit taller than his head sculpt here. And of course, it does fit into either one of his hands, or if you wanted to, you can have it fit in both of his hands. It's just, again, getting it in between. There we go. And then again, you can just bring his other arm around. I mean, for me at least, you guys can let me know down below in the comments section. Am I crazy? Generally, when it comes to figures that have gripping hands, especially if they have more than one accessory, I never display the figure with the closed fist. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Why would I do that? I know ultimately, though, if I ever decide I want to display the figure with two accessories, or if I want to have him dual wielding any accessories like I've got right now for Skeletor, it just makes more sense for me, at least, to have the figure always with gripping hands. I don't know why I can't get him standing properly. Let's take his staff, though, right now, and just move it off to the side. The figure also comes included not only with his helmet, but also his cape. The cape is about the only thing I really don't like about the figure. The way they attach it, they only attach it by a very thin plastic ring. I was thinking I was being careful. I had removed what I thought was the only bit of tape that was attaching the cape to the inside of the plastic tray. And when I went to pull Skeletor out, realized later that there was a little bit of tape still stuck on the other corner, and I almost yanked the cape off. Luckily, that wasn't the case. But you can see, like, just how very... I don't want to say hanging on by a thread, but you can see, like, how little of that actual fabric is wrapped around the circular ring here that goes then around Skeletor's head. Of course, I've moved his helmet here. The helmet is also something that can be detached. It's one of those things that actually is packaged separately with the figure. So that when you get Skeletor first initially out of the packaging, this is basically what he's going to look like. It's a really neat looking figure. Love the look at Skeletor. Now, in the New Adventures He-Man series, Skeletor would have had big, googly, almost cartoon eyes, which again may have had something to do with why he was so jarring for fans of the original Filmation series. Something again about Skeletor. I hope that this guy is not the only time we're going to be getting a New Adventure Skeletor, that maybe down the road, Mattel may also release the one that has the skull motif on his chest. And sort of that thing that looks like the top of a castle for his helmet. Love the look of that Skeletor also as well. But I think like the original look looks a lot cooler for me. The colors of the red work really well for the blue, and again, like the head sculpt is fantastic. It doesn't open or anything else. I mean, I don't expect the mouth to necessarily open, but like the color choices that they chose here, starts sort of at the back with blue, transitions nicely to that almost like a very moldy looking green like Beetlejuice, and then on the front, of course, he's got his very cool Skeletor face within the eyes inside, painted nicely in red. I don't plan to ever have the figure displayed without his helmet. The thing about the helmet, though, is not only it's wide, but it's not very soft plastic at all. I fear, this is one of my problems with this figure, is that putting the helmet on, and this is only going to happen probably only just the course of this review, and the helmet's going to always be permanently staying on top of his head. Just because I think the amount of times, if you are one that likes to take this off, put it back on, why would you even want to do that in the first place? I would think it would eventually scrape away some of the plastic or the paint on the sides of his head. For me, again, at least, I think of Skeletor, especially New Adventures, with the helmet intact. And I gotta say, like, again, like the helmet looks really neat to him. He's got some nice decorative detail there on the front of it. Sort of fans out on the sides, sort of like, I don't know, like cupped sleeves, a cupped wizard's sleeve on either side. And it's nicely done here in a dark gunmetal gray. I got a little bit of smudge on the back. I don't know if it's actually paint. If it is paint, it's not going to bother me all that much. It's probably just a little bit of what's left behind of what they've brushed on to the top and the sides of his helmet. Again, I'm never going to see it from the back, nor am I ever really going to remove the helmet. The only time you've seen it just now is probably the only time it's ever going to be taken off the figure's body. For the rest of his body, though, it's more to Skeletor, but again, when you're looking at it really closely, though, he's got all this really cool circuitry. Augmentation that he's added to his body here. It looks really interesting. He's got it on his elbows. He's got it on the sides of his arms as well. Kind of reminds me in a way like Roboto. By the way, this chest piece is a softer plastic. I think in some of the online descriptions of this guy, it says removable armor. I don't really know what exactly would be removable on him. I mean, this is attached clearly from the top of his torso. Other than just being soft and looser at the bottom, where obviously that's there just for the articulation. There's nothing really that is removable on the figure. I mean, you can't remove his arms. Maybe if anything, you could remove his helmet and his cape, but that's about it. The detailing on this guy, though, again, you got some nice silver down below here. The red that they've used here isn't quite the same red that they used for his torso, but it doesn't bother me because the nice little breakup of color, it's not just looking like one torso piece carries on all the way down to the bottom. I did say earlier, this guy looks a little bit like Laserlight Skeletor for me. The only thing I would really say is like the top of his torso. I mean, in Laserlight Skeletor's case would have been all gold. And then down below here, instead of the blue boots, they would have kind of been more gold boots. I'm sure that if Mattel wanted to down the road, they probably could retool this guy. They'd have to retool him. I mean, it's not just a simple carbon copy carryover from New Adventures over, or I guess the other way around, Laserlight Skeletor over New Adventures. But I'm sure they probably could tool a little bit of this and release this guy eventually as Laserlight Skeletor. Again, down below, you've got, again, some nice detailing there on the sides of his legs. I love the look of his big, clunky boots. He sort of has still the monster feet that Skeletor would have had in the original vintage series. But then again, like he's got, again, he's got little spikes on the side. They kind of, again, look like more just, again, a futuristic-looking Skeletor. For the figure's articulation, starting first with his head sculpt, it's going to be on a ball joint, so not only does it rotate all the way around, but it does look down, it does look up, and it does rock back and forth as well. get that cape out of the way. Upper torso is going to be on a ball joint because, again, like this is a separate piece from the lower abdomen area. It makes things quite easy to move, actually, his body up and down, and again, rocking back and forth. I did notice like his head is a little on the looser side. It might have also something to do with the fact that his helmet is a little loose too. Between the two, I feel like this could be probably just a little bit tighter. Arms do come out at 90 degrees. No problems there. You can take the arms, rotate them all the way around. All the way around. I did notice that this arm was a little on the tighter side getting him out of the packaging. No harm, no foul. You can swivel, though, at the bicep. Double hinge on the elbow. And the hands do rotate all the way around. Skeletor's lower legs do split out. They're on ball joints. He has 3/4 of the way up the thigh, a swivel cut. That rotates all the way around. Double hinge on the knee. Even though that I really only showed you the single hinge, there's a secondary hinge right there. He has a swivel, basically where the part of the boot is attached to the lower end of the calf. Then he also has the ankle pivot back and forth and an ankle rocker as well. Eventually, I would like to get my hands on New Adventures of He-Man. He-Man, I don't know what the prices of him going for. He probably is going to be a little bit cheaper than Skeletor. I think, funny enough, though, I think even though he's probably not, I don't think I've seen him recently in stores. He was one of those figures, along with some of the Revelation figures, that just sat warming pegs. And I had just keep continuing to pass by him. I thought, no, I'm going to wait it out. I'm going to wait. I'm going to get Skeletor. Skeletor is really the one I want to get first. Then I'll probably go back to He-Man. Funny enough, though, ironically enough, I think He-Man is now off the shelves. Hoping that I'm not going to have to pay the crazy price that I end up paying for Skeletor here. I mean, like, again, $91. You may say, like, that's impossible. How could you have started with an auction listing on eBay for $27 and then that jumped all the way to $91? Well, again, $27, I think shipping probably was like $35 or even, it was more than actually what the figure was selling for. And then once that was converted, once the brokerage was, I mean, basically any Canadian collector can let you know down below in the comments section. If you're a Canadian collector, let me know some of your frustrations when it comes to picking up figures online. I mean, you may think you're going in picking up something for a deal. It never is a deal. You always end up paying through the roof when it comes to getting these figures. You know, for the $91 that I dropped for him, I think it was well worth it. I know $91 is a lot. It's a pretty steep bill to pay for a Master Universe figure. But still, though, looking the look of Skeletor, again, I had always really hoped that Skeletor would eventually show up at my local Toys R Us stores or Walmarts. Nothing. Even Canadian online sites where I normally would pick up my Motu figures, having to then avoid having to go even on eBay in the first place. None of them stocked it at all. I kept looking online, Master Universe, New Adventures, Skeletor, and nothing was listed locally. Eventually, I had to pull the trigger. I went over eBay. Again, I thought I probably paid the cheapest price for him. I didn't end up really paying the cheapest price for him when everything was all said and done. But Skeletor is a nice-looking figure. Little late to the game, this guy is, getting a review out of him. But he does certainly look good with the slush head. With the slush head we just recently had a look at. Well, I don't want to say recently, a little bit while ago. But again, I was really late with looking at slush head. I'm even more later looking at New Eternia, Master Universe, Masterverse, New Adventures, Skeletor. But again, for me at least, even if the review is a little bit late, it was well worth the wait to finally have this guy as part of my collection. I do hope that Mattel is as interested in the idea of creating New Adventures of He-Man figures as I am to collect them. Although I know I sound like a hypocrite to say that, because only picking up Skeletor and slush head and not actually picking up New Adventures of He-Man, in my defense, if I can, going back to my Toys R Us stores, like even as far back as like last year, they had like 20 of those things sitting on a shelf. And I kept saying to myself, I know it's still going to be there the next time I come back to the store. And sure enough, I went back and they still had those New Adventures of He-Man figures. Now the time has actually come where I've picked up a Skeletor. Have I had an interest now to get He-Man? Yes. Are the stores still stocking the figure? No. I'm sure I'm probably not going to be paying the prices to get a He-Man, as I had to pay the prices to get Skeletor. You want to talk about stupid money, by the way. So I'm so interested to get an Optic that I even considered the idea of getting a Matty Collector Master Universe Classics version of Optic, which if anybody knows collecting those Matty Collector Motu figures, they know that they go for crazy stupid money. I think even Optic goes online right now for $150 US. That's $150 US. I'm not even going to bother to convert that. I ain't paying that kind of price for Optic. I can only hope again that Mattel eventually does release an Optic that can add this one along with Slushhead and Skeletor. Skeletor looks nice. He's a good looking figure. Even if I paid the prices that I paid for him, I don't want to say he was well worth the price, because nobody should have to pay almost $100 for a figure that's only really like a year old. If this figure, like if we're talking like the original stuff that would have been around in the 80s and 90s, paying the $100, you could probably at least justify that it's a, quote, vintage figure. But there's nothing really vintage about this figure. It's just the fact he was never distributed here in Canada. Local stores didn't have it. Online stores, at least in the Canadian area, never had it either. So eventually I had to order this guy over on eBay. And again, we all know the story that went along with it. I think he was still worth it, putting him finally on the shelf along with Slushhead. He's one of my favorite looking Skeletors we've gotten from the Masterverse line. And again, there's something charming again about the Master Universe, the New Adventures of He-Man. I think I've binge watched watched most of the seasons. I think there was only, 2 seasons. I had them actually on DVD, those remember those big, thick book box sets that we had of those, the original Master Universe from Filmation, and then the New Adventures? Just binge watched all of it. From the time that Skeletor looked like this to the time he had that big giant skull on his chest and sort of that, I don't know, kind of looking like a castle helmet that he had on top of his head. Man, I hope we really get that one as well. But again, like the longevity of whether we actually get any more future New Adventures of He-Man figures is only up to Mattel. I mean, people like me, the very limited few, the demographic that are actually even interested in New Adventures of He-Man, I hope that, again, enough of us are collecting these figures to justify more future New Adventures. What do you guys think of them? Let me know down below in the comments section. Did you guys also like the New Adventures of He-Man? I know, again, nothing to do at all with the Filmation. Battle Cat wasn't even in it. Any of the characters, really, other than just He-Man and Skeletor, were really the only ones that actually came over to Primus, but still there was something charming about Skeletor. He looked, again, extremely cartoony, especially had the big googly eyes, but there's something very charming about that Skeletor. Do you guys disagree with me? You likely will. Let me know down below in the comments section. Also, hey, as well, if you guys did like this video, I want to hit it with a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing, and you'd like to stick around for more Motu reviews, we will have a couple more actually coming your way, so make sure you come back here on a regular basis. Hitting the subscribe, turning on the bell notification, those are all crucial things to ensure that you're going to get those notifications every single time new content is popping up. Crazy stupid money. I can't believe I paid $91 for this guy. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.